So, good morning, everybody, on this Sunday morning for Vedanta Series Question and Answer. And just to remind you that if there are no questions, there are no answers. So this is an opportunity for people to highlight either from clarification of principles or from practice some useful things, useful questions in spiritual life. So we start with the normal prayer for teacher and student. Om Sahana Vavatu Sahano Punuktu Saha Viryam Karavavahai Tejasvinavaditam Astu Ma Vidvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. May that one protect us both. May that one nourish us both. May we work together with great energy. May our study be illumined. May we not unnecessarily careful with each other. Peace, peace, peace be unto all.
I don't really know how to minimize the question. It's just, I think it's a concept, really. So there's a divine timing. I've realized so much because we hear everything comes in time, everything will come on time. You know, don't worry, this and that. And I realize that is completely true. You know, there's something, there's a source which will put it in your path when it needs to be in your path. Doesn't matter if you want it now, it's not going to happen, or in 3 weeks, it's going to come when it needs to come. So when we have that intuition that we follow, and we feel something is happening, and we can feel it, we can sense it, but we can't see it manifest it. My question is, sometimes that intuition, let's say it sees brown and then suddenly it's yellow. Why? I mean, if the feeling is there, the energy is there, it can cause a lot of disappointment, to feel like it's my imagination then, but then really the energy was that energy. It's like, for example, I feel like someone is hunting me, for an example, and you feel like, oh my God, someone is hunting me. And then you feel, I think, let's say, is a person that looks like that. And then suddenly it's someone that has that energy, but looks different. So how, I mean, how did you actually, I don't even know how to say the question. No. But I found there's a lot of, you can create confusion in that sense, because you feel something is there. Let's say, I don't know, I feel someone that has a lot of energy, let's say. And I know it's going to come, this person today. And then you see the person is completely different. Well, not completely, but partly different to what you actually had in your imagination. So my question is that from external factors, or is it something dressed up by an ego or imagination? I mean, not that it happens all the time, but when it happens, it's very confusing.
Okay. So I think I have your question. Yeah. You see, what we call intuition is of two types. There's a higher intuition and there's a lower intuition. For example, all behavior, if we understand all behavior is learned behavior, when a mosquito buzzes and lands on my cheek, my instinct is to smack my cheek. Of course, there's a consequence to that. I might miss the mosquito and I might hurt my cheek. There's that side of it. Or I might kill the mosquito. So there's that kind of instinct. We might call this a gut instinct. We might call this a biological reflex. This is all in the unconscious area of the mind. Then we might have, in between that, we might have an element of imagination. That is, we see something and we fill the gaps in. Now, psychologists are very good at giving us examples of this. For example, there may be a picture with light and dark patches, and from one angle, it looks like a cup. From another angle, it looks like profiles of faces. Another famous example would be a face is presented. We have to figure out what it is. From one angle, it looks like a young maiden face. From another angle, it looks like an old person with a long nose. So I think we're familiar with some of these examples. And when we are not certain about something, the mind has a way of filling in the gaps. Now, if we feel that we are an emotional person and in tune with our instincts, in tune with our intuitions, we might be genuinely in tune with our intuitions. But those intuitions, what we might call as tuning into a cosmic mind. What do we mean by that? Well, if we take the geography of this world and take it away from our sense of individuality and bring it to the highest possible generalized area, there's no such thing as an individual mind. There's only a cosmic mind, a universal mind. And by tuning into that, we get a glimpse into the cosmic version of the cosmos. This is a kind of higher intuition, and we can learn to rely on that. For a devotee, the language will change. That is, by tuning in or by expressing our love for a personal God, we manage to get that kind of intuition. Now, the yogis will put this in the language of samyam. Samyam means, so I read this question shortly. Samyama means concentration, meditation, and ultimately samadhi on a single subject. That means it gets revealed to us. So by concentrating on something, concentration will now yield itself to a closer version of this, where one thing remains, a more subtle thing is there, and then as it is actually. That is why in meditation there are no distractions, because we can take any starting point and allow it to lead us by an investigative way to its actual component, what it actually is. We take a journey through the subtle elements, ultimately to cosmic mind, and we have then a journey on what it is, a discovery of what it actually is. Now then there's a higher intuition in that process, because in order to discover this at its most subtle level, we now go from the conscious mind, away from the unconscious mind, the instinctual mind, to the higher instincts and intuitions of what we call superconscious mind. Swami Vivekananda calls it superconscious mind. In the yogic language, it means all the energy that is being dispersed with survival issues, learned behavior. All of that then is captured in a conscious way and deliberately cultivated on its own journey. And its journey is a subtle opening. In the language of the yogis, they call this the opening up of the sushumna, that subtle nadi that the yogis experience. It is an access to the upper layers, or if you will, or the subtle layers of consciousness, revealed bit by bit until we understand the fullness of existence. Yogic language for it is sahasrara. Sahasrara, the 1,000-petaled lotus. So sahasrara, they call it a chakra, although it is really not a level of consciousness. At the ultimate, it is a union of consciousness. This unity of consciousness is experienced and expressed in different ways. Today, we can bear in mind the story of Rama. And those who don't know the story, we can go through it very briefly. And if you want a very brief synopsis of it, probably there's no better place than to go to the complete works of Swami Vivekananda. And you find there the Ramayana which is a talk delivered at the Shakespeare Club in Pasadena. In other words, it's designed for Western ears. And the beautiful story of Rama unfolds there. So if you want to know where to find it, then this is volume 4 of the complete works of Swami Vivekananda. And you simply look at the index and you'll find the story of Rama, this talk delivered. In a very, very few words, relatively speaking. In the actual book, it is essentially from page 63 to page 77, very brief synopsis. But there we find enough information to capture the spirit of the story of Rama. So we have to be careful when we look at these so-called intuitions to rule out imaginations, because in between will be imagination. That is, we have a good imagination, a creative imagination, and we might fall into the psychological trap of the brain, if you will, filling in the gaps and superimposing an image which is actually not really there. And the easiest way to avoid that is continuously tuning into cosmic mind. Tuning into cosmic mind requires these components that the yogi tells us: concentration, revelation through meditation, and ultimately revelation of how it is. And the cosmic mind, its expression is the world in front of us. Now, we can also use it in a predictive, creative sense, because knowing how to tune into the cosmic mind, we can then make sure ultimately there's only one mind. That can be our position. That means that the ultimate source of our own being is not only a witness of all these activities in our individual life, but also is in our environmental life. And every thought is very powerful, because every thought is infallible. It comes from the original thinker that religion calls God. The original thinker comes out. That means the thought carries through to the end and manifests itself as the cosmic mind manifests itself through the organization of all the subtle elements into what we have here as a so-called material existence. Another way of expressing it is, in a philosophical way, the waking world in front of us. Just as that creative area of dreamless sleep will erupt into combinations of dreams derived from memories, and that eventually crystallizes as a waking world. You see how the drama replays over and over and over again. So what we expect to happen, what we have an intuition about, we have to make sure that we are using it and confidently using it as an expression of our attunement to the cosmic mind, not actually our creative imagination. Our imagination is so vivid for everybody. There are some people who we come across, they say, "Oh, I have no imagination. I can't meditate, I have no power of visualization." All right. What is your difficulty? Well, I'm afraid of what will happen next week. I'm afraid of what will happen next year. I'm afraid about the condition of the world. I'm afraid that people won't like me. But these are all imaginary fears produced by your imagination. And then you see, if we have doubts, we're always commiserating, maybe, "Oh, this happened to me last year or in the past. I have an awkward relationship with one person." Why? Because I imagine, I recall through my memory what happened in my past. I can see in the past we had an awkward relationship. So when we meet them, I feel a little awkward. It's all your imagination, because that period of time has gone. And time is a useful thing. Mother Nature has provided us with the faculty of time so that everything doesn't happen in one go, and provide us with space to see that everything doesn't happen in one place. What a beautiful, beautiful tool Mother Nature has provided us for. So keeping close to God. Now, keeping close to God is deemed the easy way. There's the wonderful book, the Bhagavatam. Last week, I just recalled, you see, because the question was on humility. And I recall there was a passage in the Bhagavatam. And the passage really is to do with what is the easiest route in spiritual life? What is the easiest way for realization? This is chapter 14 of the 11th section of the Bhagavatam. Anyway, a question to Krishna goes like this. I consider the pursuit of the whole subject of yoga, in other words, the whole subject of spiritual discipline, as being extremely difficult for one who is not able to master the senses or the outgoing aspect of the mind. So, is there a simple way of how we can attain realization much more easily? Instead of the complex philosophy, or instead of the discipline necessary for meditation, or instead of all these other things, tapasya, self-control in an extreme way, say, this is sometimes our misunderstanding of what spiritual life will be. And we can see throughout history many examples, extreme examples of self-deprivation, whipping oneself. In Mauritius, for example, at certain festivals, you'll see people spearing their cheeks and then dragging a chariot along with it. These kinds of extreme forms of tapasya, which we are discouraged to go into. In the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna tells us this is more tamasic. This is tamasic austerity. So what is the way? Well, and still, as a background to the question, often yogis who are trying to control the mind feel despondent because they're not finding any progress, or they feel the path is too difficult. And also, owing to starting off with all goodwill, with all resolve, and then it becomes difficult. Things get in the way. Other things enter into our experience to put us off track. And so we find that there's a sense of failure, a sense of depression. So, or we become exhausted through the effort and through the struggle to control the mind. So the question is like that, that in the universe and in our history, the sages, with discrimination, they never fail to resort cheerfully to actually a different thing. That is, to surrendering at the lotus feet of the Lord. In other words, through the pure love, through the pure path of love. And the lotus feet is a kind of oriental description of saying, you see, they symbolize you carrying us across. I haven't got the purity to gaze on your eyes. I can look at your lower extremities of your feet and see the toes as kind of petals, and imagine them to be lotus flowers that will carry me across if I'm devoted to you, if I have enough faith in you. So already Uddhava, who is the questioner, is providing the answer to his own question. And these shower bliss, we can use our imagination to feel that these are showering the bliss. This is the path of self-surrender also. And if we are not sure whether we're going in the right direction, there's a wonderful path of self-surrender that is going on. So we wait for questions until I finish this section. And so this is an appeal. How can I devote myself unswervingly to you? And anyway, the answer comes like this. So, well, I shall tell you, he says, okay, some excellent forms of spiritual practice concerning the personal cosmic mind, that is the personal God, practicing which with faith we can conquer invincible death. In other words, I'm not concerned with intuition. I'm not concerned with reading another person's mind. I'm not concerned with powers. I'm concerned with tuning into this personal aspect, which we can call geographically cosmic mind. And if I do that, then all the consequences of that will come to me, which are not trivial and will not divert my mind. It will not drag the mind down into the expression of powers, individual powers, and so on and so forth. So placing the mind and the mind stuff in that entity that will protect, that will sustain, and that will also reveal. Now, going on like this, there's a passage related to humility that I wanted to complete last week. Then we can come back to picking up the question and the answer. So it goes, one exercise that can be done, looking upon all beings as myself, says the Lord, in thought, word, and deed, is to my mind, he says, the best of all methods of this personal relationship that we call worship. Ignoring or putting aside ideas of rivalry, jealousy, pity, and egoism quickly depart from a person. All these things depart from a person who always thinks of me in all people, in all beings, and ignoring the derisive smiles of one's friends, never mind what they think, and leaving aside a merely physical view, a sense of we are embodied, of things as well as shame, that is self kind of a sense of what will people think of me. One should prostrate oneself, this is the important part, on the ground before every creature down to a chandala, that is the lowest deprived person we can think of. And a cow, that is something that is considered to be plentiful and symbolic of something that is sacred, as well as a donkey, an ass, one a beast of burden, or even worse, a dog. A dog, that means a wild dog that roams around in villages and so on and eats any old thing. So in other words, we have to do that. One should worship thus in thought, word, and deed, till one comes to look upon all beings as myself. Now, Sri Ramakrishna did that himself. He went to the house of a low-caste devotee and at night cleaned his toilet, dried it with his own hair. He did it at night because he knew that his devotee would remonstrate with him. And thus he demonstrated what humility means. Supposing we are reluctant to do this literally, well, then at least we can do it mentally. Now, this is people consider this extreme. But there is a certain process going on, say at the moment, where one devotee may be giving a presentation on the subject of humility. And on some talks that I used to give in Blessington Street on a regular basis, reading out this passage, I would get up from my seat and prostrate before every person. Now in Christianity, of course, Maundy Thursday is coming up, and literally in churches, in Roman Catholic churches and maybe others, this enactment of Jesus' act of washing the feet of his disciples is literally done. I know the Pope in Rome will do it and wash the feet of selected people, no doubt. But you see, this is our humility. But what is it based on? Self-deprecation? No. It is based on recognizing the divine presence in everybody. And this is a one-way, beautiful way of seeing this entity and everything in thought, word, and deed. In other words, in deed, I can say, I love you. Will you give me a cup of tea? No, I haven't got time for that. See, the deeds don't match with the heart or the thought. None of this is, in fact, if they're not there in the deeds, they're not there in the heart either. They're just there as an intention, something that has no potency, something that is just superficial. So this is a very important passage. One should worship thus in thought, word, and deed, till one comes to look upon all beings as myself. To such a person, everything is that highest supreme called Brahman, owing to the knowledge that comes of seeing the Atman in all, because this expression of love will yield knowledge. Seeing the Brahman all round, he is free from doubts and gives up all result-orientated work. Work means all result-orientated work. This looking upon all beings as myself, I'm repeating, in thought, word, and deed, to my mind is the best of all methods of spiritual practice. Imagine. All right, having said all that, let us see what is there in the chat. How can we maintain a spiritual practice in times of war, destruction, competition, when life around seems so miserable for so many people? And why is this happening? Can the higher power not intervene? You have a wrong idea of this higher power. You think that it is an extra cosmic entity that has an intervening agenda. You're not seeing that this is an entity which is there that manifests itself as the world, and good and bad is necessary. Good and evil are necessary components. It's like saying we have a great source of energy, electrical energy, and of course, the ultimate electrical energy is nuclear energy. We can use this nuclear power to give people a life with energy for their lifestyle, or we can use it to blow the world up. Now, the choice is ours. We can't blame an unsuspecting God for it. There will always be moments of turmoil. What would we do about it? We change our perspective about it and view the world as God sees it, not as we see it. If we see it in this way and take an extra cosmic entity that I don't believe in at all. I'm an atheist with regard to an extra cosmic God. I don't believe in that kind of God. This is not the God of Vedanta. This is not the creator God that has a malicious streak and causes these things. We ourselves are causing these things. This is the law of karma. We are sowing and we are reaping. And there are innocent civilians, no doubt, who are suffering. Why should they suffer innocently due to somebody else's fault? See, this is why I repeat Shanti 3 times. There are 3 causes of our suffering and misery. The one cause is our own. We cause it. The other is from others. Other beings cause it. And the third one, and it is their bad karma that is accumulated. And we learn much from suffering. And the third is what we might call in insurance, act of God, unpredictable things. Nature is unpredictable. It works on the basis of unpredictability as well as causation. In this waking, working world, we are living in a causation, within the laws of causation, transformational causation. That is, for every effect, there is a cause. But ultimately, the cause and the effect are the same thing. Put it into wave terminology. Every wave, every depression in a wave is the cause of the next peak. Every peak is the cause of the next hollow. This is the way we can view causation. But we have to deepen our perspective and say, underneath is all ocean, is all full and free and perfect. And that ocean is what we call the Supreme. But you can't divorce the waves from the Supreme. So we have to engage a practice that starts off with seeing that being in all beings, seeing that Supreme, seeing the God in every single person, every single place, every single event, every single species, every single tree, every flower, and using the compassion that arises to purify the mind. That exercise of attunement leads us to see, it is the divine that is working through, flowing through every hand, every arm, every leg, every head, all beings, until we come to the realization by itself as everything, and then finally beyond. In, through, as, and beyond. This is our spiritual process. This is our path. So I had her hand up, so I'm going to ask her to put her microphone on again and see whether she's still confused about this.
So it's not about confusion. I think when I was listening to you, there was a word who jumped to me, which has jumped in the last few days as well, which is expectations. And I realized we are connected because we feel, it's there. And sometimes we see right, or we see it in another way. And I realized that's because there's a certain way you want things to happen, which is very deep. It makes me laugh because you get into your own trap. So you're seeing something, but it's actually not 100% because you're trying to manipulate. And that's where the control comes out. If I want my life to be like this, but it doesn't have to because you actually haven't, it makes me laugh.
Yes, because you see, every expectation is a thought movement.
Yeah.
And the thought movement will carry through, provided it is in tune with the cosmic mind's will. So it'll carry through, normally speaking, to the end, unless we cancel it or neutralize it with a doubt, with a fear. In other words, with a counter thought. So knowing that, instead, and putting the disturbance of anxiety that is there along with expectation, we can think positively. In other words, we can, with our creative imagination, put the Lord of the universe in every scene and see that every scene as an expression of this divinity. And this is what Sri Krishna is telling us. Now, the way this poetry works is very interesting. So because today is Ram Nami, we're celebrating the birth of Ram. It's very interesting to pick up the background to the story. And I recommend everybody read the story because two great epics are there in India, as two great epics are there in ancient Greece. The Iliad and the Odyssey by Homer is there. And here in India, we find this Mahabharata and Ramayana. Don't think that it's an Indian story. It is a universal story. There are a number of devotees who, reading this story, get so elevated and understand, they see it highly applicable to their own spiritual life. So the story really begins with the author, Valmiki. Valmiki was a robber, he was a murderer. And it happens that the heavenly messenger, Narada, comes and sees and gets waylaid by the robber and asks him to have some introspection on this, some rationale. You're doing all this and you're creating sin for yourself. In other words, you are predicting a bad life for yourself. Because, you see, it relies on this quality of evil. It means you're dragging your own mind down. Does your family know what you're doing, where you're getting the money from? He says, no, go home. I'll stay here. You go home and ask them. This is what I do for a living. And naturally, I'm going to accumulate bad karma from this. Will you share my sin? And find out what the answers come back. Naturally, he asks his family and he tells them, they're shocked. Oh, this is what you do for a living? Yes. This is why or how I put bread on the table. Oh, will you share my sin? No, that's entirely yours. We're happy to eat the effects of it, but we'll have nothing to do with it. And it puts him in a reflective mood. And then he becomes remorseful and says, I have to change my way. I'm alone in this. And as the Bhagavad Gita tells us, we can raise our own mind by ourselves or drag it down by ourselves. We are essentially our best friend or our worst enemy. And so Narada says, okay, let me teach you a different way, how to worship, how to meditate, how to change your mind. Naturally, when he starts meditating and Narada gives him the mantra, you see, he thinks of all the behavioral aberrations come up. Anybody who meditates will have the same struggle. All the old ghosts will start coming up, and they come up in the form of Mara. Anybody who studies the Buddha's temptation also under the Bo tree, Mara tempts him with everything he can think of. And Jesus in the desert is put in this way that Satan comes, the adversary, the counter debater, and presents him with many temptations. Everybody is beset with these things. We can put it as Mara. As he repeats this Mara, 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 embodiment of all doubts and fears and temptations, it transmutes into Rama, 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 the embodiment of strength, the embodiment of harmony, the embodiment of sattva, purity. And so it must be that he has this idea in his mind. Now, as he's going in his forest dwelling and his forest roamings, he sees the delight in spring of two birds in love. And they're engaged in a wonderful dance of pure love with each other. When we see the spring and nature, we see it as a period of this wonderful, enchanting engagement that species have that results in the continued creation. But a hunter is waiting, and a hunter shoots one of the birds, and the female is in great mourning, or one of the birds at least is in great mourning. And this mourning stirs this sage, who's now Valmiki. Valmiki because he meditated in such a way an anthill grew over him. So much did he become engaged in his meditation and absorbed in it. And so he sees this scene in front of him, and his heart is moved at the disruption of this. So something issues forth from his mouth that becomes a kind of soulful poetry, something he's not used to. He used to be a rough robber. And then you see spiritual inspiration says, in this poetic vein, please tell the story of Rama. And the story of Rama evolves from this. And it's a reenactment of this separation and this pain. Now the whole of this Ramayana is a mixed bag. There are some joys in it. There are some wonderful scenes in it. There are all moral values in it. But there's also sadness and heartfelt pain in it. Ultimately, it's the pain of separation from Sita, from Rama. I put it in a poem today, and that poem is something like this. And I'll read it so you get the gist of the story, but also the meaning behind it. You see, to cut a long story short, Rama was supposed to be the heir to the throne and was in the city of Ayodhya, and he was the ideal king. He had youthfulness, he had strength, he had attractiveness, he had judgment, he had purity. He was the ideal king. He was the embodiment of what we call dharma. But unfortunately, jealousy came in, and through various circumstances, his own father had to banish him into the forest. Now you see, in every religion, we find a version of the story. In the Jewish tradition, the chosen people are put into slavery, and then they go through the desert. And in this desert, they have to arrive at, and through faith, through absolute faith in the divine, They have to arrive at the land of milk and honey eventually. It's another way of saying that we are away from our home. We are also wandering. So wandering, and we are barefoot, scratched by thorn, spirit lagging and forlorn. This is a world that we live in with only moments of happiness, but largely it's all sorrow. And you bring up the Ukraine situation, you bring up all these devastating things, the possibility of reenacting all the mistakes of the last century that affected millions and millions and millions of lives. We hope it won't happen. We keep our own steadiness of mind. We understand that this world is full of ups and downs. This world is full of pleasures and pains, desires and fears, aspirations and the dashing of them. But how to keep our ship steady, this is the art of living, which we call spiritual life. Continuously tuning the mind sportfully into the glory of the self or the divine. So we also are wondering, we're barefoot, scratched by the thorns, and naturally our spirit is lagging because there is a separation from fullness that we always feel and are always looking for. He was away for 14 years away from home, once a king in all glory, with all prospects before him, as pilgrim Rome. We are all pilgrims. Love departed, threatened by lust. He married this Janaki, this daughter of King Janaka, and they were inseparable, like two sides of the same coin. And Rama is considered to be an avatar, somebody, some entity that comes down to restore the harmony as part of a cosmic balancing power. We also have to remember that the story begins in heaven. In heaven, there is a discussion. How can we balance this world, which is full of difficulties, which is full of forgetfulness of harmony? You see, all these wars and so on are because we have forgotten our own pristine nature. We think that what is important to us is possession, land, wealth, and power. But behind it all is this vast, vast, infinite ocean of our own divine self. We have forgotten this. And so these two, Rama and Sita, when Sita is banished in the forest for 14 years, she says, I too will come with you. No, look after the queens. No, where Rama goes, Sita goes. And along with that, his brother Lakshmana also go, and off they go, leaving behind all of the glory of kingship, replacing their royal clothes with bark, only carrying with them sufficient for survival, bow and arrow, that's all. They're still essentially military people, living the lives of hermits. In other words, pilgrims on a journey. 14 years, that is 2 sets of 7. Number 7 is significant in every culture. There are 7 days of the week, 7 notes on the piano, or 7 notes in music, whether it be Oriental or Western music. Do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do, or sa, re, ga, ma, pa, ra, ni, sa. And so our love, our real union is separated. What is yoga? Yoga means we want to reunite with our own divine self. And it is a painful process because life is painful. But if we take it as more a kind of play or a sport, then we can have a sporting attitude with it because the drama doesn't begin here. The drama begins in heaven. And all the actors come and play their parts and go back there. That we always have to remember. So love departed, threatened by lust. Rejoining her is footsteps thrust, because in the story, Ravana represents lust and represents all the external orientation to find out our happiness in the external world of senses, seizes our soul in the form of Sita and abducts her Rejoining her is footsteps thrust. Our effort is to rejoin with that sacred union, gratefully found in forest hills, strength and means to conquer ills. What should we be using? Whatever is around us. In this story, in an effort to regain the abducted Sita, Rama engages all the things around us. Monkeys. Monkeys represent really the waving, disruptive mind. But one outstanding entity is there, the controlled mind. We call this Hanuman. Concentration. Using bears and monkeys and stones and rocks and pebbles and all the natural creatures to build a bridge. So strength, what should we have? Strength. Yesterday I gave a talk on this strength. I think it was on Tuesday. The quality of strength. Strength is everything. Strength is a primary value. And Rama represents strength. Now, he had to have his strength restored. There's an episode in the story where he sits hopeless, feeling hopeless and grieving. It is Lakshmana who infuses back his self-confidence. This is the way we conquer the ills. Assemble nature's forces strong. Nature is equipped for us to deal with all of these things. Forge the means to right the wrong. You have to forge them yourself. Fire and fury vent on that which stops the sacred union's kiss. The result, in other words, Satyameva Jayati, truth alone triumphs. Everything else with the strength, with goodness and truth at our side, with all of these weapons, discrimination, detachment, with all of these weapons at our hands, we impose fire and fury on those that oppose it, on these deleterious robbers. There's every reason why Valmiki started off as a robber. You see, he was a self-robber. He was robbing himself. We seek this union of Rama and Sita, this union's kiss. When all is done for all of man, Ayodhya's home is both Sita Ram, this union, both this world, both this deep spiritual essence that is us, and the expression of it, which comes out as Sita, who comes out from a furrow, comes out from the earth, represents earthiness. This world, this relative world, it's no good saying this is a real world. No, this is an ephemeral world. But nonetheless, it's an expression of the divine. It's not separate. It's not a creation that is faulty. It's an expression of the divine, manifested from the divine. Understanding this will bring us a unity of existence. Back to realm and state of king, back to our own internal reconciliation, the kingdom of heaven that is within, our rightful place. We are heirs to a divine kingdom. And when we realize that, then we can rejoice. Rejoice now. And let all hearts sing victory. Jaya Ram, Jaya Sita Ram. And the prayer that goes with that is also telling. Lord, I am estranged from thee, though wandering as I am in the midst of separation. But in special moments, moments of inspiration, here and there, we catch it. We can cultivate those moments to make them prolonged more and more and more. I see the way. Not only the way, Jesus said, I'm the way. I not only see the way, and I recognize all the resources around us, body, mind, the earth, and all its abundance, our capacity to transform discord into harmony and overcome the basic things. By using those same basic things, they are always at hand. May I build a bridge. A bridge was necessary. Hanuman was dispatched. He offered to rescue Sita in Sri Lanka. And she said, no, Ram himself must rescue me. And so, instead of jumping across miraculously, the mind has the capacity to do it. patiently, bit by bit, progressively, we take the resources that we have and build that bridge across. At the moment there's a divide, we close the gap bit by bit, structurally every day, building a little bit more, until we have the capacity to confront the enemies face to face. What are these? They are desire, passions, lust, greed, anger, jealousy, pride. All of these, we can conquer them easily with a controlled mind and with divine grace. So may I build a bridge to unite with thee as I conquer lust, anger, and greed for the sweet union that takes place. Now, the last section, of course, of the story means that, in brief, every one of the characters goes back to the original source one by one by one. And some people say this is not part of Valmiki's Ramayana. No, it is part, because life is not smooth. Where there is birth, there is death. But as long as we maintain our steadiness and our perspective, and as long as we stick close to the truth will reveal itself. And we go back to our original source, where the drama started, in the realms of the all-encompassing, all-penetrating, all-pervading, that is called Vishnu. So these are some of the elements of this beautiful, beautiful story. I know some of you have studied this in great detail. So there is a hand up, so let me invite the hand to speak.
Sorry, Swami G, it's me again. I was just having a reflection, which is like, for example, let's say you see flowers. There's yellow flowers, there's pink flowers, red flowers. So I think I remember there were like 11 or 12 dimensions instead of consciousness. So I was having a reflection, which is people that are to serve, which is, it could get now long because what is to serve really? That are gifted, is it all in the same dimension? Or do they go through different dimensions where you tune? Because really we come through, from the same root, which is the cosmic mind. Yeah, that's how you connect. But really, like, for example, let's say, I don't know, miracles and magic, which is names which something is very abstract. Is that all from the same dimension, or is it different kind of connection?
So we have to have an entrenched and practiced and rehearsed and repeated set of principles that set our confusion aside. So consciousness can be deemed to come in 7 kind of ways and 7 levels. Each is a progressive level, and each one goes deeper to the truth. And when we have some idea of miracles, we should really acknowledge the ordinary miracles that we can see as actually extraordinary. So let me just tell you about some of them. So your question is because you have the capacity to speak. But you see, this capacity to speak comes from somewhere. And when we trace the somewhere, we are going back to one entity. It is this cosmic being. It is this divine. It is this Lord of the universe. It is this entity that creates rhythm and adjustment in the whole universe. And its nature is pure love. And that comes out to us, manifest as a capacity to love. It is pure consciousness. It comes out in us as the capacity to think. And it is pure existence which comes out in us as the will to survive. So when we think of all these other ingredients of what we think is magic, we are forgetting the real magic and the real miracles. the miracle of speech, the miracle of sound, the miracle of the heartbeat, the miracle of how a flower can grow from a potentiality into a vast oak tree and remain there for several hundreds of years. The capacity for us to see the beauty in everything. As long as we can register it in this way, as long as we can see and observe this beauty in everything, this aesthetic value in all of us. Because we have an aesthetic value in all of us, because our nature is beauty, our nature is radiance, our nature is the harmony of pure energy. All these other expressions of energy can be resolved into that. And as we go deeper, we open up new dimensions of the mind. Now, if you do that consciously and deliberately, the effects of that will be telling, and we look like a miracle worker, or we look like a psychic. If we're wise, what we will do is we will eschew, that is, we will spit out with great contempt all these powers. Because these powers, without the purity, will all go. In the story of Ravana is a meditating person. Because of his meditation, he has all the powers. Where are they from? Is always from Brahma, because Brahma is the cosmic mind. So the cosmic mind dispenses everything, doesn't judge whether it's good or bad. The thought movement will produce what we want. In Ravana's case, there was no wisdom, no purity of mind. That was the thing was lacking. There was power, but nothing else. And so he had a boon in the story. The boon is that nobody or no being will ever conquer him except a puny man. A man can do it. He can easily squash a man because he has all these divine powers dispensed from the one divinity, the creative mind itself. Through his meditation, being a meditator does not guarantee that you'll be a good person. It simply means that your concentration has developed some kind of powers in you. And if it's not developed with wisdom, all the powers will be used against humanity. So there has to be wisdom in the meditation. There has to be a purpose in the meditation to find this unity of being described as the unity of Rama and Sita. Anything else will be not only a distraction, will be absolutely damaging to us. And we eschew these powers because, let's say, for example, you develop the power to walk on water. Now, if you don't have the destruction of the ego or egoism, then you'll invite people to pay money to watch the circus show. Then your pride will develop. And your pride will then manifest itself as evil intentions. All these warfare and the desire for power and land and so on and so forth, and all this political things which cause suffering to others, is really an extension of egoism. That's all it is. So we have to conquer the ego and make it an open channel for divine grace to flow. That's what we have to do.
Sorry, I just wanted to ask a question because, till that I do understand, then there's people who kind of from generations develop it. So from very young children, let's say, they have it on them. I mean, they haven't had time to meditate.
Yes, yet. so that you see, we have to understand. What we call death is just a comma, it's not a full stop. It's a continuation of your previous built-up experiences. That's how we explain how could they be at the age of 3 a composer who composes music called Mozart. So we carry over these tendencies from a previous life is the idea of it. It's not a full stop, it's a continuation. This is a kind of law of causality. And although it is a universal concept because it used to be there everywhere. But some theologies said, no. there's a full stop to it, and the continuation will either be directed in various other spheres or post-mortem conditions, heaven, hell, etc. So there's a different idea which is actually more logically constructed. There has to be a reason why we are born with a certain proclivity and expression of certain talents, certain skills, certain behaviors. Even in identical twins, we have these differences. And when you see, is it genetic? No, it cannot be. Is it that the soul was born in one moment and goes on continuously? No, we can't have that. It's not logical. So is it something inherent in us that continues? Is the most logical, backed up also by research from which is conducted mainly at the Virginia University in America. Much data to do with previous lives and so on, and the idea of transmigration, or what we unfortunately call reincarnation. So these are there, but whatever happens, in Mozart's case, it was useful. It was a great use of talents. But in many other people, it becomes a destructive tendency. And with that platform, we have the opportunity to change it. That opportunity is called nature, response to nature. When we do the Enneagram, we are studying the response to nature, how we can change our behavior. Everybody has the opportunity to do it, and it comes in moments. It comes in a series of units within time. It comes within opportunity moments called space. And so these are the resources we have to use to transform our own reality. So, okay. Anyway, the time is gone. I hope this was useful to us. Thank you.
Thank you, Swamiji.
Thank you, Swami.
Merci beaucoup, Swami.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you, Swami.